She took everything. The sofa, the television, the plates, the towels off the bathroom rack, the food from the refrigerator, the half-empty bottle of dish soap from under the sink. And then she took $91,000 and walked out the door. He didn't chase her, didn't call, didn't say a word. He just sat down on the cold hardwood floor of an empty apartment and breathed. $247 in his account, a cracked phone in his pocket, a crinkled lottery ticket in a junk drawer he hadn't opened in months. She thought that was the end of the story. She was wrong. Because that ticket, the one she didn't know existed, the one she didn't think to look for, the one sitting forgotten behind dead batteries, and a pen, that didn't work, was about to change everything. And she would never see a single dollar of it.
The apartment was empty. Not messy empty, not moving day empty. Empty like something had been surgically removed and nobody bothered to sew the wound shut. Jerome Ellison stood in the middle of the living room at 5:47 in the evening on a Tuesday in October, still in his work jacket, still smelling like jet fuel and machine grease. Steel-toed boots on the hardwood floor he had refinished himself 3 summers ago, on his hands and knees on a Saturday, while Lydia was at brunch. He stood there and he looked. The bracket was still on the wall, 4 screws, 4 small holes where the television used to hang. That 47-inch screen Lydia had insisted they needed, the one that cost more than his first car, the one she watched reality shows on, while he ate dinner in the kitchen, because the sound gave him headaches and she said he was being dramatic. Gone. The sofa was gone, that deep gray sectional that sat in the center of the room like a throne, the one Lydia called a statement piece. The one Jerome had quietly pointed out they could not afford, and she had bought anyway on a joint credit card 2 days later without mentioning it again. Gone. The coffee table, the 2 end tables, the lamps with the gold bases, the abstract print above where the sofa used to be, the one Lydia had shipped in from a gallery in Buckhead and Jerome had hung crooked twice before getting it right. The small console table by the door, the mirror above it, the ceramic bowl on the console where they used to drop their keys, all of it, gone. Jerome walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator was open, interior light on, empty. She had taken the food, the good plates, the wedding gift set in the box they had never finished unpacking, the pots, the Dutch oven he had bought himself for his 35th birthday because nobody else was going to buy it for him, the dish rack, the sponge holder. He opened the cabinet under the sink. The dish soap was gone, the half-empty bottle of dish soap, gone. Jerome closed the cabinet slowly, the way a man closes something when he does not trust what his hands might do next. He pulled out his phone, opened the banking app. He already knew. He had known the second he walked through the door and saw the bracket on the wall. But knowing and seeing are 2 different things, and sometimes you have to see it to make it real. Joint checking account, $0. Joint savings account, $0. His personal checking account, the one where his direct deposit from Dobbins landed every other Friday, $247.16. She had left him $247.16. Jerome put his phone back in his pocket. He walked to the kitchen counter. The note was there, single sheet of paper, cream-colored, her handwriting in black ink, the looping careful cursive she used when she wanted something to look composed. Jerome. I've taken what's mine, the accounts are settled, I've moved on. Please do not contact me. No signature, no Lydia, just the period at the end of that last sentence like a door being shut. He read it once, folded it in half, put it in the front pocket of his work jacket, right over his chest. Then he sat down on the floor. The hardwood was cold through his jeans. He sat with his back against the kitchen island, knees up, hands resting on his thighs. And he stayed there, not crying, not calling anyone, not doing anything except breathing the kind of careful, deliberate breathing a man does when he is trying to convince his body that this is survivable. It was survivable. He was fairly certain it was survivable. The apartment was very quiet. Jerome Ellison was 37 years old. He made $59,000 a year fixing aircraft engines at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Marietta, Georgia. He had worked there for 11 years. He knew the inside of a C-130 the way some men know the inside of their own homes. Better, maybe. Because machines made sense. They followed rules. When something broke, there was a reason. You found the reason. You fixed it. The machine worked again. He had 3 things he did every single day without fail. He made a pot of coffee in the break room every morning at 6:45 and poured cups for every man on his crew without asking, because he knew their orders by memory and had for years. He kept a photograph in his wallet, his father in 1987, standing in front of a small Cessna at the Macon downtown airport, wearing his work coveralls and squinting into the sun. And he called his mother every evening at 8 o'clock. Every evening. Didn't matter if he was tired. Didn't matter if there was nothing to say. Those were the three things. Lydia used to call them his quirks. He called them the floor. The thing he stood on when everything else moved. He would need that floor now, because everything else had just moved. 6 months before Lydia packed that U-Haul. Jerome Ellison already knew. He had not always known. That was important to understand. There had been a time, early, when he had believed what he saw. Lydia laughing in that kitchen in their first apartment in West End. The tiny one with the broken radiator and the neighbor who played jazz at midnight. Lydia eating the jerk chicken he made and saying, with genuine surprise, that it was the best thing she had tasted all week. Lydia in that green dress at his cousin Randall's wedding, her hand in his, dancing badly and not caring. He had loved her then, completely and without strategy. The change was gradual the way erosion is gradual. You don't notice the cliff is smaller until one day you're standing closer to the edge than you expected. The Tuesday evening in April was not gradual. Jerome had come home early, not drastically early, an hour maybe. A hydraulic line inspection had gone faster than projected and Calvin Wallace had told him to go home. Get some rest, they'd finish the paperwork in the morning. He had stopped at the Kroger on Roswell Road, bought ground beef and a bell pepper, had an idea about dinner. He opened the apartment door. Phyllis Monroe was sitting at his kitchen table in his chair, drinking coffee from his French press, the good one, the one he kept for weekends. Lydia was across from her, also with coffee, both of them, in the particular posture of a conversation that has been going on for a while. Intimate, settled, like they had been there for hours. They both stopped when Jerome walked in. Phyllis smiled, too wide, too fast. Lydia turned her coffee cup with both hands. Jerome set the grocery bag on the counter. Phyllis, he said. Jerome. She smiled again. Didn't know you'd be home early. Wrapped up fast today. He started unpacking the bag. Bell pepper on the cutting board. Ground beef in the fridge. You want to stay for dinner? I'm making something. I was just heading out. Actually, Phyllis stood, gathered her bag, kissed Lydia on the cheek, the quick practiced kiss of women who see each other constantly. Talk later, she said to Lydia, and the words meant something. Jerome could hear that they meant something. He did not ask what. He washed the bell pepper, found the cutting board, started dinner, and later that night, when Lydia was in the bathroom running the shower, Jerome sat at that same kitchen table with his coffee and thought about what he had seen, not what they said, not what he imagined, what he actually saw. Phyllis Monroe stopping mid-sentence when the door opened, Lydia turning her cup instead of looking up. Two women in the particular posture of a plan. Jerome drank his coffee. He did not confront, did not accuse, did not set anything in motion that he was not ready to finish. He started to pay attention. The name Terence had appeared on Lydia's phone 6 weeks before that. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she went to the bathroom. Not intentionally, she left things everywhere. Jerome was not a man who looked at his wife's phone. He was not built for suspicion, but the phone had lit up with a notification as he walked past. He had glanced down the way you glance at any lit screen. A reflex. Terence, you free tonight? Jerome had stopped, looked at it for 1 full second, then kept walking. He did not pick up the phone, did not read the thread, did not say anything when Lydia came back and picked it up herself, checked it, then set it face down on the counter. He sat down with his book. He was a man who needed to understand a thing completely before he said it out loud. That was not weakness. That was how he was built. The same way he would not call a system broken until he had run every diagnostic. Rushing to a conclusion on incomplete data just meant you fixed the wrong part. So he waited, he watched, he kept making the coffee, kept calling his mother at 8, kept going to work, fixing the engines, coming home smelling like jet fuel, and he started to understand. There are 5 moments that Jerome would remember from those last months. Not the big ones, the small ones. Because the small ones were where the truth lived. The company dinner was the first. Lydia had been invited to a networking event hosted by Pinnacle Group's executive team. She had asked Jerome to come. He had gone, good shoes, his one decent blazer, freshly pressed, halfway through the evening. A man Jerome did not know had shaken his hand and asked what he did for work. Before Jerome could answer, Lydia had laughed. Not a mean laugh, worse, a dismissive one. The kind that said the question was too small to be interesting. He fixes planes, she said. The small parts nobody sees. The man had nodded politely and moved on. Jerome had finished his water and said nothing. Later, driving home, Lydia had talked the whole way about the connections she'd made, the developer she'd spoken to, the opportunity she could see building. Jerome had looked at the road ahead and made the sounds a man makes when he is listening and thought about the small pots nobody sees. Those pots kept planes in the air, every one of them. Credit card statement was the second. $3,100 from a boutique on Buckhead's main strip. A bag. One bag. Jerome had seen it arrive, a slim rectangular box, tissue paper inside, and he had sat across from Lydia and said very quietly that they could not afford that right now. She had looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who is missing the point. Jerome, I'm not going to spend my life thinking small. I'm not asking you to think small. I'm asking you not to spend $3,000 we don't have. I have it handled, on a joint card. I said I have it handled. He had not pushed it. He had gone to the kitchen, washed the dishes that were in the sink and gone to bed. Because he knew, in the way you know things you don't want to know, that this conversation had already ended before it started. The ceremony was the 3rd. Dobbins had held its annual recognition event in August. Jerome had been nominated for a commendation. Master Sergeant Calvin Wallace had submitted the paperwork himself. Jerome had told Lydia the date 4 weeks in advance, written it on the calendar on the fridge, the morning of. Lydia had said she would be there by 6:30. Jerome had stopped checking his phone. Calvin had sat next to him, had shaken his hand when they called his name, had said on the drive back to the parking lot, only this. Your work speaks for itself, always has. That was enough. Jerome had driven home to find Lydia already in bed, reading her phone with the bedside lamp on. She had looked up when he came in. How was it, she asked. It was fine, Jerome said. He went and brushed his teeth. She did not ask anything else. The 4th moment was smaller than all the others. A Thursday evening in September. Lydia had gotten dressed to go out, not dressed casually. Dressed the way she dressed when she wanted to be looked at. The wrap dress, dark burgundy, the one that made strangers glance twice. Heels. Her good earrings. Hair smooth and straight, falling just past her collarbone. She said it was a client event. She said she'd be back by 11. Jerome had sat in the kitchen with his coffee and his book and the sound of her heels on the hardwood going toward the door. He had looked at his book. The words were there. He read the same paragraph 3 times without registering a single word. He set the book down, made a second cup of coffee, sat there until it was cold. The 5th moment was not a moment at all. It was a sentence. They had not been fighting. That was what made it worse. They had been sitting after dinner, not talking, the comfortable silence of 2 people who have run out of things to say. And Lydia had looked at him across the table and said it the way you say something you have been rehearsing. I deserve a life you can't give me, Jerome. That's not cruel. That's just true. She said it like a diagnosis, like she was doing him a favor. Jerome had looked at her for a long moment. Then he had picked up his plate and taken it to the sink. He had stood there back to her, water running over his hands, and thought, so this is where we are. He did not throw the plate, did not raise his voice, did not say the things that were crowding against his teeth, wanting to get out. He turned off the tap, dried his hands, said he was going for a walk, and he walked. 40 minutes through the neighborhood, hands in his pockets, leaves starting to turn on the trees. Atlanta doing that particular October thing where the air finally softens after months of hard heat. He walked until the things crowding his teeth settled back down. Until he was just a man walking. He came back. She was in the bedroom with the door mostly closed. He made the 8 o'clock call to his mother, and then he went to bed on his side of a bed that had been getting wider for months. The day Lydia left was a Tuesday in late October. Jerome knew before he saw the truck. He did not know how he knew. Some shift in the air, maybe. Some long-gathering knowledge settling into certainty the way a diagnosis settles after you have already suspected the answer. He pulled into the parking lot at 5:32 and there it was. A rental truck. Medium size, the kind you get for a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom, backed up toward the building entrance. Jerome sat in his Camry for 45 seconds. Then he got out. Lydia was in the stairwell doorway when he reached the entrance, directing Phyllis Monroe and a woman Jerome recognized as Camille from Lydia's office. They were carrying the sectional sofa between them, moving in careful sideways steps. Lydia's hair was pulled back. She was wearing that fitted charcoal jacket she wore when she meant business, and dark slacks. And the expression of someone executing a plan they have been rehearsing for weeks. She saw Jerome. She did not stop directing. Careful on that corner, she said to Phyllis and Camille. Then she looked at Jerome again. No flinch, no apology in her face. Just the particular calm of a woman who has already moved past this moment in her mind. Jerome. Lydia, this is how this goes, she said. I'm not going to stand here and argue. I'm taking what my salary paid for. You can keep the apartment. He looked at the sofa being loaded. That sofa came off our joint account. My income funded that account. She said it without heat, factual. I'm not going back and forth with you on this. He stood in the doorway and watched. Because what was the alternative? Call the police over a sofa. Watch her leave while making a scene in the parking lot of the building where his neighbors lived. He moved to the side and let them work. They came back for the TV, then the coffee table, then the lamps, the side tables, the abstract print Lydia had shipped from Buckhead, the ceramic bowl from the console by the door. Phyllis Monroe would not look at Jerome directly. Camille had clearly been briefed on how to behave. They were efficient and they were quiet, and they moved through his home like it was already not his home. Jerome sat on the floor in the corner of the empty living room, back against the wall, and let it happen. At some point Lydia came and stood in the doorways of the living room. She had an envelope in her hand. I went to the bank this morning, she said. The joint accounts are closed. The money was half mine, Jerome. You know that's fair. $91,000. That was what was in those accounts. The saving they'd done together, which meant mostly what Jerome had managed to set aside between her spending over years. Don't contact me, she said. There's nothing to talk about. She left the envelope on the floor in front of him. Then she turned and walked back to the kitchen to direct the removal of the pots. Jerome did not open the envelope. He could see through the paper that it was a single sheet. The note. He knew what it said. He picked it up, put it in his jacket pocket, over his chest. He heard them in the kitchen. Heard Phyllis say something in a low voice and Lydia's quiet response. Heard the cabinet under the sink open. Heard it close. Heard the particular sound of the front door. Then quiet. Jerome stayed on the floor. He did not know how long. Eventually he got up, walked the apartment one room at a time. The bathroom, stripped of every product, every towel, even the soap dish. The bedroom, just the bed frame because it was his. The mattress Lydia had taken because she had picked it out. The kitchen, the under-sink cabinet, the dish soap, gone. He stood there for a moment. Then he went to the last drawer. The junk drawer, all the way at the back, the one nobody ever cleaned out. He pulled it open and sorted through what was left. Old takeout menus, a dead flashlight, 2 loose batteries, a pen that didn't work, a grocery store loyalty card from a store that had closed, and in the very back, wedged against the wooden panel of the drawer like it had been there for years, a lottery ticket, crinkled, slightly faded, the receipt paper kind from a gas station printer. Jerome looked at it. He did not remember buying it. He bought tickets occasionally. Not regularly, sometimes, when he stopped for gas and the jackpot was high enough to make the news. He would slide $2 across the counter and take whatever the machine printed, a small ritual of possibility that cost less than a coffee. He must have bought this one and forgotten. He usually let the machine pick the numbers, but sometimes, when he was tired or distracted, he filled in the same 6 by hand his father's birth month, the year his parents married, the address of the house he grew up in on Delmer Street. 3 numbers that had no logic except that they were his and he had used them so long they came out of his hand without thinking. He could not remember which kind this ticket was. He looked at the numbers in faded ink and did not know. He looked at it for another second. Then he put it in the pocket of his work jacket. He stood in the empty kitchen for a long moment. He picked up his phone, opened his contacts, found his mother's name, Gloria, the G that had sat at the top of his most called list for 11 years. He looked at her name. He did not call. Not yet. It was 6:14, not 8 o'clock. He would call at 8 o'clock. That was the rule. The floor, the thing you stood on when everything else moved. Jerome walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot below. The rental truck was gone. Lydia's car, the silver Audi she had financed last year without discussing it with him, was gone. The parking space that had belonged to that Audi for 18 months sat empty under the amber glow of the lot light. He turned from the window, checked his banking app one more time. $247.16. He looked at the 4 screw holes in the wall where the TV bracket used to be. He looked at the floor he had refinished on his hands and knees on a Saturday 3 summers ago. Still good. Still solid. He had done good work. Jerome Ellison turned off the kitchen light. He picked up his keys from the floor where he'd set them when he came in. Because the ceramic bowl by the door was gone and he had nowhere else to put them, he walked out, pulled the door closed behind him. The lock caught with its familiar click. He sat in his Camry in the parking lot for a while. Outside, Atlanta moved the way Atlanta always moved. Traffic on the road beyond the complex. A siren somewhere in the distance. Somebody's music drifting from an upper floor window. The world doing its ordinary business without any awareness that a man's life had just been carefully, efficiently emptied. At 7:58, Jerome started the car. At 8 o'clock exactly he pulled over 2 blocks from his mother's house in Decatur and called her. She picked up on the second ring, "Baby." Her voice, warm and steady, the voice that had been the first sound he remembered as a child. "Mama." A pause. The good kind. The kind between people who know each other too well for pretense. "You want to come home tonight?" Jerome looked through the windshield at the quiet street ahead. The old trees. A porch light on across the way. Somebody's dog, small and unhurried, crossing the sidewalk. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Room's ready," Gloria said. "I made rice." Jerome put the car in drive. In his jacket pocket, over his chest, was a folded note from a woman who had just taken everything and thought that was the end of the story. In the other pocket was a crinkled lottery ticket he did not remember buying. Neither of those pieces of paper looked like anything yet. But then again, most things don't. Not at first. The spare room at Gloria's house smelled like cedar and old books, and something Jerome could not name but had always associated with safety. It was small. Twin bed with a blue quilt his grandmother had made. One window facing the backyard where Gloria kept her garden. A wooden dresser with a slightly warped top drawer that had always been slightly warped, since Jerome was a boy, and had never been fixed because it still worked fine, and some things you just learned to live with. Jerome sat on the edge of the twin bed that first night and looked at his hands, mechanic's hands, thick at the knuckle. A small scar on his right index finger from a tool slip 7 years ago. Hands that had refinished floors and hung brackets, and carried furniture and cooked meals and built a life inside an apartment that had just been emptied by a woman in a charcoal jacket who moved like someone executing a plan. He looked at his hands for a long time. Then he put the crinkled lottery ticket on the dresser, set his phone next to it, lay down on the blue quilt without taking his shoes off. The ceiling was the same ceiling he had looked at as a boy. Same water stain near the light fixture. Shaped like something he used to decide was a dog and sometimes decided was a cloud. He was 37 years old. He had $247. He had a jacket on a hook behind the door, a cracked phone on the dresser, and a bed that fit him the way childhood beds never quite fit you once you're grown. He was home. He was not sure if that was the worst thing or the best thing. Both, probably. Both. The first week was logistics. The grinding mechanical kind that keeps grief at a distance by keeping your hands too busy to feel anything. Jerome went back to the apartment to return his keys and sign the early termination agreement. The property manager, a man named Bernard who had always been decent and did not pretend this was not awkward, set the papers on the desk between them and did not make Jerome explain. The penalty was $4,800. Jerome signed, wrote the check, left with $212 in his account and a stomach that felt like it had been filled with wet concrete. He went to the storage unit place on Marietta Boulevard and rented a 5x5, $68 a month. He loaded what he had left, his tools, careful in their cases, his military service certificates in their frames, wrapped in an old shirt, 3 boxes of clothes, the photograph of his father in a sealed envelope so it wouldn't bend. He sold his father's Omega Seamaster watch at a pawn shop on Buford Highway. He stood at the counter while the man examined it and thought about his father's wrist, thought about the way that watch had caught the light on Sundays. The man offered $380. Jerome took it without negotiating. He went back to work. That part was the easiest, not because it didn't hurt, because the hangar had its own logic. The aircraft had their own demands. KC-135 with a hydraulic irregularity did not care about Jerome's apartment or his marriage, or the $212 in his checking account. It needed a diagnosis, it needed a fix. Jerome could do that. Jerome was good at that. He made the coffee at 6:45. Poured cups for every man on his crew, did not miss a single order. Calvin. Wallace got his black with 1 sugar, same as always. Randall got his with too much creamer, same as always. The whole routine unchanged because the routine was the floor and Jerome needed the floor. He ate lunch alone. He used to go out with 2 or 3 of the guys on Thursdays. Burgers from a place on the highway they'd been going to for years. $14 with a drink. Jerome had $14. He did not have the extra $14. So he brought a peanut butter sandwich from Gloria's kitchen, wrapped in wax paper the way Gloria had always wrapped sandwiches. And he ate it at his workbench and read the maintenance manual he'd already memorized just to have something to look at. Nobody asked, except Calvin. It was a Wednesday afternoon, day 11. Jerome was finishing a checklist at the end of the day, and Calvin came and stood at the edge of his station the way Calvin stood when he had something to say. Not leaning, not rushing, just present. "You dropping weight," Calvin said. Eating a little less, Jerome said. Calvin was quiet for a moment. You need anything? No, sir. Another pause. Calvin had a gift for pauses that were not empty. They were the kind of silence that said, I see you and I'm not going to embarrass you with it, and my door is open and you know where to find me. All right then, Calvin said, and walked away. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. Jerome drove the long way home some nights to avoid passing certain streets. Not Lydia's street specifically. He didn't know which street Lydia's new apartment was on, but there were streets where they had eaten dinner together. A barbecue place on Cascade where she'd ordered the same thing every time and said she was a creature of habit. A coffee shop on West Paces where they'd gone on Sunday mornings in the early years. A park where they'd walked and she'd held his hand and he had believed, with his whole chest, that they were building something real. He took the long way. It added 12 minutes. 12 minutes was nothing. 12 minutes was a fair price. The third week was the week of the Kroger parking lot. He had gone on a Thursday evening. He had calculated carefully. He had $43 until Friday's paycheck, which would replenish things somewhat. He needed milk and bread and the dried beans Gloria favored and a few other basics. He had his list written on the back of an old receipt. He got through the store. He got to the register. $41.17. He had $43 he paid. Put the bags in the trunk of the Camry, the one with 187,000 miles, and a rattle in the exhaust that he'd been meaning to look at for 6 months, and kept not getting to because there was always something else. He sat in the driver's seat. He did not start the car. He looked through the windshield at the Kroger sign buzzing yellow-orange against the early dark. People moving in and out through the automatic doors. A woman with 2 kids. An old man pushing his cart to his car with the careful deliberateness of someone whose knees hurt. A teenager on his phone not watching where he was going and somehow not hitting anything. Regular Thursday evening. Jerome opened his phone, went to his contacts, found Lydia's name. It was still there. He hadn't deleted it. He didn't know why. Maybe because deleting it felt like a decision he hadn't made yet. Maybe because he was still in the middle of understanding what had happened, and deleting her name felt like closing a case file before he'd finished reading it. His thumb rested on her name. One tap. He could call her. He didn't have to say anything specific, didn't have to beg, could just call. Hear her voice, say something neutral. Keep the door cracked open a few more inches. His thumb stayed. 3 seconds. 4. He set the phone face down on the passenger seat, started the car, backed out of the space carefully, the way he always backed out of spaces, checking both mirrors. Signaling even in a near-empty prom parking lot because his father had taught him that habits matter, and you practice them when nothing is at stake so they're automatic when something is. He drove home. He did not call Lydia. He never would. That was the night, though he did not know it yet, that he truly understood what he had chosen. Not just chosen not to call, chosen something larger. Chosen to be the man who sat in a Kroger parking lot with $43 and his pride intact and drove home and did not make a single desperate phone call. That choice would compound, the way good choices always do. 3 weeks later on a Friday afternoon, Jerome's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but he was in the break room, coffee in hand, and he answered. Jerome Ellison. A woman's voice, professional, no extra syllables. Yes, this Lydia, not his Lydia. Different tone, wrong cadence. I'm calling about your vehicle insurance policy, except it was not. That became clear in the next 6 seconds, because the voice shifted, became itself, became the voice he knew, and she said, "It's me. I need you to do something." Jerome said nothing. "I need you to sign a supplemental form for the insurance separation. They need both signatures. It's just a formality." Jerome looked at the wall of the break room. The safety poster he had looked at 10,000 times. Proper lifting technique, proper protective equipment. "Send it to me in writing," he said. A pause. "Jerome, it's a simple form. It'll take you 2 minutes. Send it to me in writing." Another pause. Longer. "Fine," she said. "Cold now." The professional voice back, "Except colder. I'll have my attorney send it." "That's fine," Jerome said. And he ended the call. He stood there for a moment. Then he poured his coffee out, rinsed the cup, put it in the drying rack, and went back to work. That was the only time Lydia called. In 8 weeks. One call about a form. No "how are you?" No "I'm sorry." No acknowledgement that she had taken a dish soap from under the sink of a life they had built together. Just a form. Jerome signed the form when it arrived, and sent it back the same day, and did not read the cover letter from her attorney more than once. He was very good at not doing things that would not help him. The Wednesday of the 6th week was the night of the lottery. Jerome and Gloria had eaten dinner together the way they had been eating every night. Her cooking, him doing the dishes after, the routine settling into something that felt less like necessity and more like an arrangement that had always existed, and they had just temporarily forgotten. Gloria made rice and smothered pork chops. Jerome ate 2 plates, which surprised him because he hadn't had much appetite in weeks. But something about the pork chops, the way she seasoned them, the way she covered the pan and let them go low and slow, something about that reached past the concrete in his stomach and found the part of him that could still be fed. They watched the evening news together afterward. Gloria in her chair, Jerome on the sofa with the worn arm that had always had a worn arm. That was just how that sofa was. Nobody was fixing it. The news ran through its regular inventory. Traffic on I-285, a development dispute in Buckhead, a school board vote, the weather, which was doing nothing remarkable. Then the anchor shifted tone, the particular upbeat shift that precedes lottery numbers. Tonight's Powerball jackpot has reached $847 million. Gloria made a sound, not words, just the low musical exhale of a woman who has heard impossible numbers before. Lord, she said, can you imagine? Jerome small. The first real smile in weeks. Maybe, because Gloria said that every time, every single time, can you imagine? Like the possibility was genuinely worth sitting with for a moment. He reached for his coffee cup and stopped. The lottery ticket. He had put it in his jacket pocket the night Lydia left. The night of the empty apartment and the bracket on the wall and the dish soap. He had found it in the junk drawer, crinkled, faded, forgotten, and put it in his pocket. And then he had gone to his mother's house and put the jacket on the hook behind the bedroom door, where it had been hanging for 6 weeks. Jerome set down the coffee cup. He got up, walked to the bedroom, unhooked the jacket from the door, reached into the left front pocket. The ticket was there. He brought it back to the living room. The anchor was finishing the setup, the cheerful explanation of tonight's drawing, the camera cutting to the lottery display. Jerome sat down, unfolded the ticket on his knee. The numbers printed across the bottom in faded ink. 6 numbers. He had not looked at them since the day the machine printed them at the gas station. Whenever that was. Weeks ago. Months, maybe, the anchor said. Tonight's winning numbers. Jerome looked at the screen. The first number came up, 18. He looked at the ticket. His first number was 18, which meant nothing yet. 18 came up all the time. 18 was just a number. The second number, 22. Jerome's ticket said 22. He went very still. Third number, 31. The ticket said 31. Something was happening in Jerome's chest. A quiet rearrangement, the kind that happens before you know what it means. Fourth number, 44. The ticket said 44. His breathing had changed. He wasn't sure when, but it was different now, shallower, careful. The way breathing gets when the body understands something the mind hasn't caught up to yet. Fifth number, 52. The ticket said 52. Gloria was saying something. He heard her voice without hearing the words. Everything had narrowed down to the screen and the small crinkled piece of paper on his knee. The anchor paused, the way anchors pause before the Powerball number, that half second of constructed drama, and the Powerball number tonight. Jerome was not moving. 11. He looked at the ticket, the Powerball. 11. Jerome sat there and sat there. The ticket was in his hands, and his hands were not moving, and the television was saying something about what an incredible night. And there were numbers on the screen and numbers on the ticket, and they were the same numbers, and he understood this in his mind clearly and completely, and it still did not feel like something that was happening to him. $847 million. Gloria said his name. He looked up. She was watching him, head slightly tilted. The expression a mother gets when she has been watching her child for 37 years and knows when something is wrong, and also when something is very, very different from wrong. Jerome. I'm all right, Mama. He folded the ticket slowly, careful with the creases, the way you're careful with something that suddenly matters. Put it in his shirt pocket, got up, walked to her chair, leaned down and kissed her forehead. Good night, he said. You sure you're all right? Yes, ma'am. He went to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the twin bed under the blue quilt in the dark. $847 million. He sat there for a very long time. He did not whoop, did not cry, did not call anyone, did not open his phone and start calculating. Just sat in the dark with the ticket in his shirt pocket, pressed against his chest and breathed, and thought about one thing. She can never know. Not a vengeful thought, not a hateful one. Just the clearest thought he had ever had in his life. Simple as a torque spec, simple as a safety rating. She cannot know. That was the entire strategy. Fully formed in 4 words, before he had spoken to a single lawyer or done a single search or made a single plan. She can never know. At 6:45 the next morning he called in to Calvin and said he had a personal matter he'd need the day. Calvin said fine, no questions. Jerome already had coffee made and a name. He had met a man named Bernard Reeves at a cookout at Calvin's house 2 summers ago. Bernard had a cousin woman named Alana Vance, a lawyer in downtown Atlanta who Bernard said had handled a property dispute for a family member. Done it clean and fast and without anyone losing their composure. Jerome had filed the name away. The way he filed away useful information in the quiet back cabinet of his mind where things stayed until needed. He called Bernard at 7:15. Bernard answered on the 3rd ring, still sounding like sleep. I need your cousin's number, Jerome said. The lawyer, a pause. Alana, yes. Everything all right. I need her number, Bernard. Bernard gave him the number. Jerome thanked him, hung up, dialed Alana Vance. A receptionist answered. Vance. Monroe and Associates. Jerome said he needed to speak with Ms. Vance directly about a time-sensitive financial matter. The receptionist said Ms. Vance was with a client until 11. Jerome said he would hold if necessary or call back. The receptionist took his name and number. Alana Vance called him back at 10:48. Her voice was what he expected from what Bernard had described. Precise, economical. The voice of a woman who charged for her time and made every word earn its place. Mr. Ellison, Bernard Reeves gave you my number. Yes, ma'am. He said financial matter, time sensitive. How time sensitive? I need to move in the next 2 weeks. A pause, brief, assessing. Come in today at 4, she said. Bring identification. Bring anything in writing related to the matter. Don't discuss this with anyone before we speak. Understood, Jerome said. He wore his good slacks, the dark ones, a button down, pressed. His one decent pair of shoes. He looked in the mirror at Gloria's house and thought about whether this was the right outfit for this meeting, and then decided it didn't matter what he wore because what he was carrying mattered more than how he looked carrying it. Alana Vance's office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown. Clean lines, good furniture. The particular quiet of a space where serious things were handled seriously. Her assistant walked Jerome back without ceremony and opened the door. Alana Vance stood to greet him. 51, maybe, dark blazer, hair pulled back, reading glasses on the desk in front of a legal pad with notes on it from her previous client. Eyes that took inventory of you in about 3 seconds flat and did not make a production of it. They sat. Jerome reached into his jacket pocket and set the ticket on the desk between them. Alana looked at it, did not touch it yet. Tell me the situation, she said. Jerome told her. He told it the way he wrote maintenance reports. Chronological, no editorializing, facts in order. Marriage of 6 years. Separation, wife initiated, 42 days ago. Joint accounts cleared by wife, $91,000. Divorce proceedings initiated. Papers signed by both parties, not yet finalized. Ticket purchased approximately 8 weeks ago. Discovered last night during lottery broadcast. Alana picked up the ticket, examined it, put it down. 40 seconds of silence. It's marital property, she said. I know. Purchased during the marriage. Legal claim exists until the divorce decree is final. How long until it's final? Depends on the court calendar. Could be 3 weeks, could be 6. Jerome nodded. What are my options? Not a question. Quite. More like an invitation. Come show me the diagram. Alana looked at him for a moment, the assessing look again. But this time there was something else in it. A small recalibration. We form a trust, she said. An anonymous one, under Florida statute, which is where the lottery operates. The ticket gets signed over to the trust. The trust claims the prize. Your name appears nowhere in the public record. And if she finds out anyway, she would need to prove the connection. Which means she would need evidence you are the beneficial owner of the trust. We build the structure specifically to prevent that. Multiple LLCs, layered ownership. Nothing with your name, your address, your social. What's the trust called? Alana had her pen ready. Jerome thought about his father. About a photograph in a sealed envelope in a storage unit on Marietta Boulevard. About a small airport in Georgia and a man in coveralls squinting into the sun in 1987. Macon Sky Trust, he said. Alana wrote it down. There's one other thing, she said. She set the pen down. The tone shifted slightly, not softer, more direct. My firm ran a preliminary background review when Bernard called ahead. Standard practice for financial matters of this scale. A pause. Your wife retained a divorce attorney 8 weeks before she left. Filed preliminary asset disclosures the same week. Jerome was quiet. In those disclosures, Alana said she listed the joint accounts, the vehicle, the furniture, contributions to the household by both parties. A beat. There is no mention of any lottery activity. No mention of tickets, no mention of gaming assets of any kind. Jerome waited. Which means, Alana said, that she prepared a legal accounting of your shared life and did not include something she didn't know existed. Because she didn't know I bought it. Because she didn't know you bought it. Alana picked up her pen again. That is the gap. That is what we work with. She planned everything, Jerome thought, except the things she didn't know to plan for. When can we start, he said. We already have, Alana said. The 14 days that followed were the longest of Jerome Ellison's life. Longer than the 6 weeks before them, because before he was surviving. Now he was waiting, and waiting with a secret of this size is its own particular endurance event. He went to work, made the coffee, fixed the engines, ate the sandwich, rode the bus when he had to and drove when he didn't, and took the long way home and called Gloria at 8 and lay on the twin bed under the blue quilt and stared at the ceiling. He told no one. Not Calvin, not Bernard, not Gloria, not a single person. He would tell Gloria eventually, when it was done and safe and real, when there was nothing left to threaten, but not yet. He was very good at waiting. Because here is what nobody talks about, the part of silence that is not passive. It takes something to hold a secret like that, to go through your ordinary days, the bus ride, the sandwich, the coffee you pour for other men without being asked, and know what you are carrying and not let it change your face, not let it leak into your posture or your voice or the way you set down a coffee cup. Jerome had always been built for this, had always been the man in the room who revealed less than he knew, who let people underestimate him because it cost him nothing and sometimes cost them everything. He was about to find out how much it had cost Lydia. It was day 11 of the 14 when Phyllis Monroe texted. He had not heard from Phyllis since the day she stood in his living room directing furniture removal and wouldn't look him in the eye. He had not expected to hear from her, had not wanted to, had genuinely forgotten to think about her in the context of anything other than that day. The text came at 9:40 in the evening. Jerome, I know something's going on. Lydia knows it too. You should call her. He read it twice. Then he screenshot it, sent it to Aline, for the file. Asana's response came back in under 4 minutes. She must have been working late. Good. Don't respond. We're moving the claim to day 12 instead of 14. I'll have the travel arranged by tomorrow morning. Jerome put his phone face down on the nightstand. He looked at the ceiling, the water stain that had always been a dog or a cloud, depending on the day. Tonight it was a dog. He was okay with that. The night before he flew to Tallahassee, Jerome did not sleep particularly well, not from anxiety, from something closer to the feeling before a significant maintenance job. That sharpened state that isn't quite fear and isn't quite excitement, but lives in the same neighborhood as both. He got up at 2 in the morning, went to the kitchen, made himself a cup of tea because it was too late for coffee, sat at Gloria's kitchen table in the dark with the small light over the stove turned on, the one that was always left on at night. He took the photograph out of the envelope. He had retrieved it from the storage unit 3 days earlier. Couldn't say exactly why, just needed it closer. His father, 1987, Macon Downtown Airport, coveralls, slightly too big at the shoulders, face turned toward the camera but eyes going toward the plane beside him, a small Cessna. Like he can't quite look away from the machine even while someone is trying to photograph him. His father had never flown in anything he worked on. He was a painter, ground crew. He touched the planes but they took him nowhere. Jerome had thought about this often. The way his father had spent a career in the proximity of flight without ever quite leaving the ground. Jerome had gotten his license at 26. Small aircraft, nothing commercial. Just enough to go up alone on Saturdays when the weather was right and the hangar wasn't busy. He hadn't told many people, it wasn't something he talked about. He looked at his father's face for a long time. Then he put the photograph back in the envelope. He understood something in that kitchen at 2 in the morning that he had always known but had never put into words before. He had chosen this work, chosen these engines, chosen this particular proximity to flight, not because it was practical, though it was, not because it paid steadily, though it did. He had chosen it because his father had chosen it first, because he had grown up watching a man find dignity in the work of his hands, in showing up every day, in being the person the machines could count on. That was the inheritance. Not money, not property, the shape of a man's character. Lydia had looked at him and seen what he didn't have. She had never looked at what he was, her loss. Jerome went back to bed at 3:15, set his alarm for 5, lay down on the blue quilt and closed his eyes. He slept. The flight to Tallahassee was 1 hour and 12 minutes. Jerome and Alana sat across from each other in the small plane, Alana with her legal binder open, Jerome with nothing in his hands. The lottery commission offices were clean and bureaucratic and staffed by people whose job was to process extraordinary events with ordinary procedure. Alana handled all of it. Jerome sat and signed where indicated and answered 2 questions directly when asked and otherwise let Alana do what Alana was built to do. The officials reviewed the ticket, verified the numbers 3 separate times, each person independent of the others. They reviewed the trust documentation, reviewed the claim form, had a 15-minute private review with their own legal team. Then the head of the claims division came back into the room and said the words that Jerome heard in a kind of underwater clarity, like sound traveling through something denser than air. Everything is in order. Congratulations, Mr. Ellison. Jerome nodded, signed the final form, Macon Sky Trust, $389 million, after taxes, lump sum, into a trust that had no public face, no traceable owner. No thread leading back to a man named Jerome Ellison who made coffee for his crew and drove a Camry with a rattle in the exhaust and had $212 in his account as of 6 weeks ago. On the plane back, Alana closed her binder and looked out the window for a while. Then she looked at Jerome. "How do you feel?" she said. Not the casual version of the question, the genuine one. Jerome looked at the clouds below them, the way the light sat on them from above, the way Georgia looked from up here, green and wide and unaware of any of it. "Like I can breathe again," he said. Alana nodded once, and did not ask anything else. The lottery announcement ran that evening on the Atlanta News. Anonymous trust claims $847 million Powerball jackpot. Winner has invoked right to privacy under Georgia statute. No further details will be released. In a new apartment in Midtown Atlanta, a woman named Lydia Ellison was sitting on a white sofa she had picked out herself, in a space she had decorated herself, watching television with a man named Terrence Cole, who was on his second scotch and checking his phone. The announcement ran. Lydia heard the words Powerball and Anonymous Trust and she looked up from the magazine she wasn't reading. And then the anchor said the drawing date. And then the anchor said the city. Lydia sat very still. She thought about 6 numbers. She recognized 2 of them immediately. His father's birth month, the street number from the house in Macon where Jerome grew up, the one he still mentioned sometimes without realizing he was doing it. She did not know all 6. But she knew enough, and she knew Jerome knew that when he was tired or distracted, he fell back on the same handful of numbers he'd been carrying since before she met him. Numbers that meant something to him and nothing to anyone else. She thought about the date on that ticket. She thought about a junk drawer. Lydia set down the magazine and picked up her phone. She called 19 times in the first 3 hours. Jerome was in Gloria's kitchen, having dinner, rice and chicken. Gloria was telling a story about her neighbor's new fence. Jerome was eating and nodding and listening to his phone buzz 19 times in his pocket and eating another forkful of rice. At 8 o'clock he called Gloria at the table, made her laugh about the fence, cleaned the dishes and went to his room. He looked at the missed calls, 19. He turned off the screen, put the phone on the dresser, took the photograph of his father out of the envelope. Macon Sky Trust. Some things you name after what matters. Some things you build for the people who came before you and never got to fly. Jerome set the photograph against the lamp on the dresser where he could see it from the bed, lay down on the blue quilt, and slept the deepest sleep he had slept in months. The calls did not stop that first night. 19 became 23 by midnight, then silence until 4 in the morning, then 2 more, then nothing until 8, when a single call came through and rolled to voicemail. Jerome, sitting at Gloria's kitchen table with his coffee, listened to it once. She said his name 3 times. That was how it started. Jerome. Jerome, Jerome. Like repetition would produce him. Like saying a thing enough times made it obedient. He deleted it, made a second cup of coffee, and went to work. 31 calls across the first 4 days, 19 of them in the first 3 hours alone. Jerome counted not obsessively, but the way he counted anything that needed to be understood to get the shape of it, to know what he was dealing with. He made the coffee at 6:45, poured Calvin's cup first, black, 1 sugar, same as 11 years of same. Ate the sandwich at noon, called Gloria at 8, slept on the twin bed and woke at 5:45 and started again, 1 fence post after another. Something solid to put his hand on while everything around him did what it was doing. The texts came on day 3, not pleading ones, not yet, sharp ones, written from a position of outrage that had not yet understood it had no leverage. Jerome, I know it was you, I know those numbers, don't do this. Then. You have a legal obligation here. I will involve my attorney then. At 11:42 at night. We were still married when you bought that ticket, you know that. Jerome read each one, screenshot each one. Sent each screenshot to Alana with nothing attached, just the image. Alana sent back the same response every time. Good, keep going. Keep going, that was the instruction. That was the whole of it. And Jerome followed it the way he followed every instruction worth following completely. Without drama, without deviation. Lydia's attorney reached Alana on day 5. A formal letter, the language of someone testing a door to see if it opens. Alana called Jerome that evening. They're testing, she said, seeing if there's a crack. There isn't. I know, a pause. They have nothing. No evidence connecting you to Macon Sky Trust. No documentation, no witness. The trust is clean, they can file if they want. A judge dismisses it in 60 days. What do I need to do? Nothing, Alana said. That's the answer. He was very good at nothing. Because nothing, in this case, was not passive. Nothing was a choice made fresh every morning. The active daily discipline of a man who understood that every response he gave would be used as thread to pull, and he was not giving them thread. Not 1 inch. Alana responded to the attorney's letter on day 6. 3 sentences. The trust is a legally formed entity operating in full compliance with applicable statutes. My client has no comment on your claims. If you intend to proceed, proceed. There was no second letter. What happened instead, on day 11, was a conversation Jerome did not witness but would understand completely when he heard about it later. Lydia had come home to the apartment she shared with Terence Cole, and she had told him everything. Sat across from him at the dining table she had chosen. In the space she had decorated herself and laid it out. The ticket, the numbers, the trust, the name, the timeline, the attorney's letter that had gone nowhere. All of it. Terence had listened. He had his drink in his hand. He set it down when she finished, looked at her across the table for a moment, and then he laughed. Not a surprised laugh. The flat practical laugh of a man doing arithmetic. You left $400 million, he said. For me. Lydia said nothing. Baby. He shook his head. That's not love. That's just bad math. Then he picked up his phone. Not her phone. His. He called his own attorney, right there at the table, while Lydia was still sitting across from him. He described the situation in the careful, neutral language of someone assessing an opportunity. He asked whether there was any angle from his position, any claim he could make, any thread worth pulling. He made the call like she wasn't there, like she was furniture, like she was a sofa he'd gotten used to but could have moved out by Tuesday if he found a better arrangement. Lydia sat across from him and heard every word. She did not get up, did not walk out, did not say anything. She sat in the chair she had picked and looked at the man she had chosen and understood. In the way you understand things you have been refusing to understand for months. Exactly what she was looking at. Terence hung up, picked up his drink. My guy says the trust is airtight, he said. Nothing to do, he shrugged. One shoulder, rough break, 2 words, rough break. That was what 6 months of planning and one spectacular miscalculation got her from the man she had chosen over Jerome Ellison. Rough break. Lydia stood up from the table. She walked to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed she had picked out, looked at the walls painted the color she had chosen and said nothing, and felt something that did not have a clean name. Not grief, not anger. Something colder and more specific. The feeling of a woman who has just located exactly where she went wrong, and understands that the location does not help her. She had traded a man who would have sat on the floor, and stayed for a man who made phone calls at the dinner table. She had traded someone who knew her coffee order and her birthday and the exact pitch of her laugh when something was actually funny for someone who just told her it was a rough break. She sat there a long time. Jerome heard about that evening from Renee Washington, who told him in the plain-spoken way. Renee told everything without embellishment, without satisfaction, just the facts in the order they happened. Renee had heard it from Camille, who had been there that night and left early and spent the drive home deciding she was done with all of it. When Jerome heard it, he felt nothing he had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction, not the hot, bright thing you feel when someone gets what you thought they deserved. Just the quiet understanding of a man who can see exactly where a system failed because he has been trained to find the failure point. It makes sense. It confirms what the data already suggested. The collapse around Lydia was not loud. It did not happen all at once like a building coming down. It happened the way things actually fall apart slowly, then completely. And by the time most people noticed, the structure was already gone. Phyllis Monroe went first, not confrontationally. Phyllis was not built for confrontation, she simply became unavailable. The calls went unreturned a little longer each time. The group chat went quiet from her end. She stopped suggesting dinners, and when Lydia suggested them, something always came up at the last minute. A work thing, a family thing, something. Jerome understood this about Phyllis without being told. Phyllis had invested in a version of Lydia that was ascending, a Lydia who had made the bold choice and was going to be the success story, the cautionary tale in reverse. Phyllis had told that story to herself and to everyone in their circle for months. The story had not gone the way she told it, and Phyllis was not a person who stayed near things that contradicted her narrative. So she became unavailable. One unanswered call, then two, then a breezy text 3 days later about being slammed at work, then nothing for a week, then nothing at all. The absence of Phyllis Monroe was not dramatic. It was just an empty space where someone used to stand, and eventually Lydia stopped turning to look at it. Renee Washington was different. Renee had worked at Pinnacle Group for 9 years. She was precise and direct and had what her mother called a low tolerance for foolishness dressed up as ambition. She had watched Lydia's choices from the professional distance of a colleague who is friendly but not close, and she had kept her opinions to herself because they were not hers to give. Until the morning Lydia walked into the office 2 weeks after the lottery announcement and tried to move through the day like nothing had shifted. Renee let it go until after lunch. Then she walked to Lydia's office, closed the door, sat down. "I'm going to say something once," Renee said, "and then we're going to be professional because we have to work together." Lydia looked at her. "Everybody in this building knows what happened," Renee said. "Every single person. Nobody is going to say it to your face, so I will." She did not look away. "You made a choice. It didn't go the way you planned, now you live with it." A pause. "That's all," Renee said. She stood, straightened her jacket. "I'm not saying this to be cruel," she said. "I'm saying it because somebody should." She walked out and left the door open and went back to her desk. And Lydia sat in her office for a while and looked at her computer screen without seeing anything on it. Lydia's attorney made one final attempt. Filed a preliminary motion requesting disclosure of the Macon Sky Trust's beneficial ownership under the argument of marital asset concealment. Alana's response came back within 48 hours. Jerome did not read all of it. Alana summarized in one sentence, "We explained in considerable detail why they have nothing." The motion was denied. The attorney sent Lydia a letter advising her that without evidence of her ex-husband's connection to the trust, further legal action was not advisable. He recommended she redirect her energy toward her own financial planning. She had $91,000, which was real money, which was a start. If you were clear-eyed about what you were working with and what you had done to get here, it was not $400 million, but it was what she had. Terrence Cole did not last the month. Jerome heard this through Bernard Reeves, who had heard it through the ordinary channels of a city where everyone who matters to anyone eventually connects back to someone you know. Terrence had moved on with the efficiency of a man who was always moving on. New project, different part of the city. He was not, by any account, troubled by any of it. This was exactly what you would expect from a man who made phone calls at the dinner table. Jerome thought about Lydia once more, briefly, and then filed it away with the rest of the things that were finished. The house in Cascade Heights was not a mansion. This was important. This was intentional. Jerome had learned, over the course of a marriage to a woman who loved statement pieces, that the statement a statement piece made was almost never the one you thought it was making. A mansion was not what you built a life inside. A mansion was a posture, and he was done with postures. The Craftsman on the corner was built in 1948, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a front porch with a swing anchored to the ceiling beams. The floors were original hardwood, worn smooth in the traffic patterns of every family that had lived there before him. They needed refinishing. Jerome put on his knee pads and did them himself. 2 weekends, Saturday and Sunday. Back and forth across the grain, the smell of the work filling the house. He was not in a hurry. He had done this before and he knew that rushing floors was how you ruined floors. He paid $1.6 million in cash through the trust. He moved in on a Saturday in January. He had rented a truck for the day and loaded his storage unit himself, and Calvin Wallace showed up at 7 in the morning without being asked, with a cooler of sandwiches and coffee in a thermos. And they worked the whole morning without saying much. By afternoon the boxes were in. The bed was up. The tools were in the garage in their cases. They sat on the front porch with cool between them. Calvin opened 2 sodas, handed one to Jerome. They looked at the street. Nice neighborhood. Calvin said. Yes, sir, Jerome said. They sat there a while. You doing all right? Calvin said. Better than I was. Jerome said. Calvin nodded, finished his soda, set the can down careful. Good, he said, and that was enough. Because Calvin Wallace was a man who understood that some questions got answered by the evidence already in front of you. And pushing past that was not curiosity but intrusion. And he was not built for intrusion. Jerome was grateful for that, more than he could have said. The Macon Sky Scholarship took shape over the next 2 months. Alana structured it through the nonprofit arm of the trust. Full tuition, books, a living stipend, 20 students per year. Dobbins Community College Aircraft Maintenance Program. Priority given to students from households under a defined income threshold. Not because poverty was a credential, because Jerome knew what it cost to want something you could not reach. And he knew that sometimes the only missing ingredient was someone who handed you the step. He carried no name anyone could trace back to him. The scholarship existed and it worked, and that was the point of it. Calvin Wallace was the only person at Dobbins who knew the source. Jerome had told him on a Tuesday afternoon in February. The hangar quiet after everyone else had gone home. Just the two of them and the sound of metal cooling. Calvin had listened to all of it. Then he was quiet for a moment, you know. Calvin said, "The family's fund got a donation a couple months back. Anonymous, $4 million. Changed a lot of situations for a lot of people on this base." Jerome said nothing. "Biggest single gift they ever received," Calvin said. He looked sideways at Jerome. "Anonymous." Jerome picked up a wrench, turned it in his hands. "Strange coincidence," he said. Calvin looked at the floor. Almost smiled. He never brought it up again. He did quietly make sure 12 students found the scholarship application in its first year. The year settled into its shape. Jerome went to a church in the neighborhood in May. Not because he was looking for it. He walked past on a Sunday morning, and the doors were open and the sound came out and something in him turned toward it. He sat in the back. Nobody made a fuss about him. He came back the following Sunday. By July he knew most of the regular congregation by name. They knew him as Jerome from the craftsman on the corner, the one who fixed aircraft, the one who made potato salad for the 4th of July gathering and did not make a big thing about how good it was even though everyone said so. This was a life, not a recovered life, not a consolation prize, not what remained after something better had been taken away, just a life, his, built on the floor that had always been there. It was a Thursday in September when he saw Lydia. He had started walking Piedmont Park in the late afternoons, long loops around the North Path, nothing meditative or intentional about it. Just what he did when the heat of the day had loosened and the city felt more like itself. He came around the bend near the fountain and she was there, on a bench, alone, a lunch container on the seat beside her, half finished, her hair pulled back simply. She was wearing something plain, the kind of thing she would have called too understated 2 years ago. She was looking at the fountain and not re-seeing it. The expression of someone who has been inside something hard for a long time, and is coming out the other side without knowing yet what the other side will hold. Jerome recognized that expression. He had worn it himself for months in Gloria's bathroom mirror. He did not change his pace, did not cross to the other path, did not look away. She looked up when he was 20 feet out. Their eyes met. Her face moved through several things in about 2 seconds. Recognition. Then something complicated that lived between shame and grief. Then the particular stillness of a person unsure what they are allowed to feel. She started to stand, drew a breath for something she had probably rehearsed in some form for months. Jerome looked at her, 1 full second, not with anger, not with triumph, not with pity, with something that did not have an easy name, something that recognized her as a person who had made choices and was now living inside them, something that did not require him to react. Then he kept walking, did not stop, did not turn around. The path curved and the fountain sound faded, and the trees opened onto the wider meadow and Atlanta went about its business, completely unaware of the specific gravity of the moment it had just hosted. Jerome walked the rest of the loop. When he got back to his truck he sat for a moment, hands in his lap, the window still warm from the afternoon sun. He thought about that bench, about the woman on it, about the charcoal jacket and the moving truck and a note on a bare kitchen counter and a dish soap gone from under the sink. He did not feel what he expected to feel. He felt nothing he needed to hold on to, which meant he was done, actually done, not pretending to be done, not working on being done, but the real kind of done that does not announce itself, that you only recognize when you check for the weight and find it gone. He started the truck, pulled out onto the street, took the long way toward Dobbins because he had told Calvin he might stop by before the afternoon shift ended, and there was something he wanted to check on. It was the scholarship students' second week of practical lab work. Jerome came in through the side entrance of the community college hangar. The instructor, a man named Gerald who had been doing this for 22 years, acknowledged Jerome with a nod and kept running his demonstration. Jerome stood at the back of the room, 12 students at their stations. A training aircraft up on blocks at the center of the space. Gerald walking them through a diagnostic sequence on the landing gear assembly. A kind of sequence Jerome had run 10,000 times and could do in the dark. One student at the front of the group was not just watching, he was tracking. Following each step not with the polite attention of someone being graded, but with the focused hunger of someone who actually needs to understand how this works. Jerome had seen that look before. In the mirror, 20 years ago, the student's name was Dion Briggs. Jerome knew this from Calvin's updates. 23 years old, Southwest Atlanta. His mother had worked nights and days both for years to keep the lights on. Dion had the aptitude scores and the mechanical instinct, and had not had the money until the scholarship put it in front of him. After the demonstration, Gerald broke the group to their stations. Dion passed near the back of the room and glanced up. Visiting. Direct, no performance. Just looking around, Jerome said. You work on aircraft. 11 years. Dobbins Base. Dion's face shifted the way a young person's face shifts when they encounter someone whose path runs ahead of theirs, and they suddenly understand that the path is real. That's what I want, Dion said. Not casual, certain. Not just the school part, the real work. The work is the real part, Jerome said. Dion thought about that, nodded slowly, like he was filing it somewhere useful. My father used to say something like that, he said. He said the men who fix the engines never get the credit. The suits take the bows. But nothing flies without the men under the wing. Jerome was quiet. Your father sounds like a smart man, he said. He was. Dion looked at the training aircraft across the room, the clean lines of it, the logic. He passed 3 years ago. Never got to see me start the program. Jerome looked at the aircraft too. He looked at it a long time. He sees it, he said. And he meant it the way you only mean things when you have earned the right to mean them. Dion looked at him. Something in the look that was not sentimental. Just two people recognizing the same gravity. Thank you, Dion said. He went back to his station. Jerome stood at the back of the hangar for a moment longer. The sound of tools, the smell of machine oil and metal, the particular smell of this kind of space, this kind of work. The smell Jerome had been breathing for 11 years, and his father had been breathing for 20 years before that in a smaller hangar at a smaller airport in Macon, Georgia. He walked out through the side door, sat in his truck, put his hands on the wheel and did not start the engine yet. He thought about a photograph, 1987. His father in coveralls outside a small Cessna. Face turned toward the camera, but eyes drifting toward the plane, the way they always drifted toward the plane. Because even when someone was trying to take your picture, the machine was still there and the machine still had its pull. His father had spent a career in the proximity of flight without leaving the ground. Jerome had gotten his license at 26. Had gone up alone on Saturdays when the weather held and the schedule allowed. Had never told many people. It wasn't something he talked about. He understood now, sitting in that parking lot, why he had never talked about it. Because it was not a story about him. It was a continuation of a story that started with his father. A man who touched the planes and never flew in them. Who showed up every day with his coveralls and his steady hands and his dignity intact. Who passed those things down not through words but through example, the way the best things always get passed down. That was the inheritance. Not money, not property, the shape of a man's character. And Jerome had carried it through a marriage that tried to convince him his shape was wrong. Had carried it through 6 weeks of sandwich lunches and bus rides and a parking lot in Decatur where he almost made a phone call and didn't. Had carried it through a cold apartment floor and a note in a jacket pocket and $247 and a crinkled ticket in a junk drawer that turned out to be worth everything. He had carried it, and it had carried him. Jerome sat in the truck until the afternoon light shifted and the hangar behind him started to empty out. Students heading to their cars with their bags over their shoulders. Dion Briggs among them. Walking with the unhurried confidence of someone who knows where they are going. Jerome watched him go, then he started the truck. He had promised Gloria dinner on Sunday. He needed to call her at 8. He had a back section of the porch floor that still needed one more pass with the sander. Not urgent but on the list. Calvin had mentioned a new intake coming through the family's fund next week that could use some informal guidance from someone who knew the base. Things to do, not obligations. Just the ordinary matter of a life being lived. He pulled out of the lot. The road back to Cascade Heights ran through older neighborhoods. Big trees arching over the pavement. The kind of streets that have been streets for a long time and carry that history in the roots pushing up through the sidewalks. Jerome drove without hurrying. The house was quiet when he got home. He unlocked the front door and went inside and stood in the front room for a moment. The floors he had refinished caught the late light and held it. The walls were plain. The furniture was good and simple and chosen for comfort rather than impression. No statement pieces. Just a home. He went to the kitchen, started a pot of rice, seasoned the chicken the way Gloria had taught him, which was the way her mother had taught her, which meant it was not a recipe so much as a practiced knowledge that lived in the hands. He cooked. The smell of it filled the house. At 8 o'clock he called Gloria. She picked up on the second ring, baby. Her voice, warm and level, the voice he had been measuring his days against for 37 years. Mama. You sound good, she said. I am good, he said. And it was true in the way that things are true when you have stopped performing them and started simply living them. Not loud good. Not celebrating good. Just the steady, grounded good of a man who has found his floor again and knows it will hold. Sunday, Gloria said. I'm making the short ribs. I'll be there, he said. I know you will. A pause, the comfortable kind. Jerome, ma'am, your father would be proud of you, she said it simply. Not as comfort, as fact. The way she stated faction, because they did not need it. Jerome stood at his kitchen window, the backyard in the early dark, a neighbor's porch light on through the fence, the sound of the city. Steady and indifferent and alive. I know, Mama, he said. He did know. He had always known in the way you know things that were given to you before you had words for them. He had just needed to find his way back to the knowing. Through the noise and the marriage and the charcoal jacket and the empty rooms and the long bus rides and the parking lot and the lottery ticket and the trust and the house and the scholarship and the boy in the hangar who talked about his father and did not know he was talking to the man who made it possible. Through all of it, back to himself. Jerome Ellison didn't win because of a lottery ticket. He won the night he sat on that cold floor with $247 and put his phone down without making the call. Some men spend their whole lives waiting to be seen. Jerome already knew his worth. He just needed the world to catch up, and now it had. He finished cooking, set the table for one, ate his dinner in the quiet house with the refinished floors and the front porch swing and the photograph of his father on the dresser in the bedroom where it had always been since the night he moved in. Outside, Atlanta moved the way it always moved. Traffic and sirens and someone's music from a window somewhere and the ordinary unceasing business of a city that does not stop for anyone. Inside, a man ate his dinner, and that was enough.